to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
It's once again time for Ohio Exopolitics Radio with your host, Mark Snyder. Join him with his ongoing research of the fact that remain on.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. My guest this evening is Nancy Leader and Starr DiGiacomo. We're going to be talking about Planet X. They are my Planet X experts, so to speak. Nancy, how are you this evening?
Doing good.
Starr, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing pretty good. Are you guys hearing? I was getting kind of a background hiss there for a while. Were you hearing that?
It's gone now. Gone now.
It's kind of going away. Let's go with it. If we need to reconnect, we'll do that. Has it been since August that we talked last?
I wouldn't be surprised.
My goodness. How is that? I've totally lost track of time, evidently. Nancy, why don't you start out and tell us a little bit about your website again, in case some listeners haven't heard of you before.
ZetaTalk.com. It's been around for close to 20 years, since 1995. It's all about a telepathic conversation with aliens from Zeta Reticuli. And I had myself altered, you'd have to say, with a little bit of their DNA in my brain where the telepathic center is, so that I could understand their communications better and wrap English around it. It was instantly popular. In 1995, in Michael Lindemann's 2020 group, he was a founder of the 2020 group, but it was ISCNI, Institute for Contact with Intelligent, etc. It was instantly popular. It was either threatening to people, or they were said it had the ring of truth, etc. So later that year, I formulated a website, but within that Michael Lindemann's group, I began answering questions. People said, well, you people who are contactees, why don't you carry your questions, to the aliens that you're meeting with and bring back the answers? And I said, well, I'm getting them all the time, my answers. What do you want to know? And it took off. And that is really the substance of the ZetaTalk website. It has been built on people asking questions and what the Zetas responded to. They've made multiple predictions of Earth changes which have come true. They've been the only source talking about inbound Nibiru. Well, of course, Zechariah Sitchin and the ancient Sumerians and blah, blah, blah talked about this extra planet. But in 1995, the Zetas were saying, it's coming in 2003. Here's where you're going to see it in the night sky, and where you can find it. And people did. We had several teams in Africa, in Europe, in the U.S., that were going to observatories or using amateur equipment, etc., and taking photographs. And it was tracking where the Zetas said it would be, when they said it would be there. And they said it was going to appear in the night sky to the east of Orion's belt, etc., March something or other. And it was so accurate. There it was. It was just a hair off from what they had said 7 years earlier. It would appear. Then it crossed over Earth's orbit and was closer to the sun, where it has been creeping past the sun and now outbound. So it's lost in the glare of the sun a lot, but people are taking pictures of it. It has a vast sweeping tail full of moons, lots of red dust, and if you use the right filter, you can get all of that, which people have been doing since 2003, particularly Alberto, an old Italian gent who takes fantastic photos. He was doing this in 2003 and followed the Zeta recommendation that you filter for light in the red spectrum, not use a red sheet, but allow the red spectrum light to dominate, and you'll see it best. He uses Mylar and the insert from floppy disks, and gets these gorgeous photos that show it clearly. But people all over the world are following this technique or others, and even seeing it naked eye. Sunset, sunrise, you often see it as a second sun because the sunlight bounces off the dust cloud and creates that. It's as bright as a second sun, etc. Now, the main message is twofold. We're going to have cataclysmic changes in our pole shift, a crustal shift, which we have every 3,600 years. Step back, Jewish Exodus, step back, blah, the flood was 3 back, etc., etc. And the geology of the earth attests to this, you know. The second is the alien presence is real. We've been here. We're contacting people like crazy. It's time for an awakening where this has to be admitted, because people really do understand subconsciously that aliens are here, etc. And it's no longer a big scary message. Let's just have the governments admit it, which many are doing, like Russia, etc. is, and the U.S. is one of the biggest foot draggers because they were at the helm of the cover-up. Ronald Reagan said it shall be a national secret after Roswell, etc. And everybody is still uptight about that. So, and the other is, okay, geological changes, aliens are real. We're in a transformative period in which mankind is going to take its next leap forward, become a hybrid between the Zetas and humans in their next incarnation, etc. So it's that dual message, basically. So that was a long-winded introduction to my website.
When did you get these telepathic messages?
Well, actually, this is the way aliens talk to humans, and contactees will tell you that. You know, they didn't say any words. I just got the message. I understood what they were trying to communicate to me, etc. But I was in my late 20s when I had this particular operation done. It was infused. It's not like they opened my head. I don't think they did that. I think they teleported the DNA into my head, and then checked that it was okay. After that, even though I didn't know I was a contactee until I was in my mid-50s, but in my late 20s, I realized I was more telepathic. I would know who was calling, you know, before I picked up the telephone, that type of thing. So I knew there had been a change. We were just getting ready for the future, and ZetaTalk was a plan, and it turned out very well. They said it was much more successful than they thought it would be.
And the telepathic information that you get, what form is it in? Do you see images, or how?
I can. It's not that you hear a sound or see something like a flash of light in the room. You know, people will say, well, that's schizophrenia, but it's not that. I don't hear a sound. I don't see things with my eyeball. When you have an idea, or when you're daydreaming, you know, you're musing, an idea will pop into your head, and you say, wait a minute, what about this? You know, that's what it's like. An idea pops in my head, and they will send me out to do a web research, you know, to check a geology of an area if they want to give me an answer, and talk about rock strata or mountain ranges in a particular area. They'll have me go and research this information, or chemistry, or whatever, look up terms, so that I'm ready to receive their information, and I have a basis, you know, for putting what they're telling me, you know, in my head. In other words, I have to come up to speed and get on the same page. But it's just an idea, a concept that will pop into your head.
Starr, are you getting these telepathic messages?
No, I follow Nancy. I have my own contactee experiences with ETs, not necessarily always Zetas. A lot of different entities that I didn't know existed until I found Nancy. I thought I was crazy. So it's different. Nancy is fine-tuned, let's say. But I follow the ZetaTalk website and post to poleship.ning. And then when I recognized that social media was a great outlet to be discussing these things and sharing everything that I know, that took off. So Facebook and Twitter for me is big.
Nancy, did you feel that the Zetas lied to you in 2003?
Well, I took one for the team. I didn't know it was a white lie until it actually didn't materialize. And I had to believe, that 2003 or shortly thereafter, or within a week or within days, there was going to be a pole shift. We had government agents here coming and going, keeping an eye and watching. They weren't even shy about saying, well, I'm Air Force here and blah, blah, blah. And, because if I had not believed it, George Bush, etc., would not have done what he did, which was invade Iraq ahead of time. He didn't even wait for the UN inspectors to finish looking for weapons of mass destruction. He rushed in April, ahead of May 15th. And it was obvious that was what he was doing. Now, the whole world, who was listening to ZetaTalk says shortly after May 15th, 2003, understood that they were not going to get a warning from the U.S. administration. They even joked around in Iraq and had an Operation Planet X, the military did at one point. They knew about ZetaTalk, and I was on coast to coast several times going into that date. And it was quite clear that the establishment, the elite, were going to let the common man just take it on the chin. Here come the big flood tides. Here comes the crust shift. We're not even going to tell you to get away from the coast. We're not going to say a word. And they didn't say a word. And that was a way of proving, how those in control of the U.S. government, the elite, were not going to inform people. So the Zetas had their own reasons for doing that. And I understood afterwards that unless I really believed, and I believed it, I ran charge cards up to $40,000. I had like 6 charge cards.
Wow.
I was retired at that time.
That's horrible.
Based on the income that I was making, which was pretty close to I was making like $90,000 at the time out in California, and based on that, I qualified for these charge cards, and I ran them all up because I said, well, I'll never have to pay them off. And then, boy, I'm telling you, I had to work for 6 years to pay off those charge cards. I was stunned. But I took one for the team. This is a team effort. This is war. This is not a tea party. I'm not one of these people that just gets to sit down and blog and everything. It's wonderful. It's rough. There's a lot of opposition to the information that we're relaying. There are people, the wealthy, the bankers, they do not want the common man to have this information about the passage and how devastating it's going to be. They want the people paying their mortgages, going to their jobs. Most people live on coastlines, in cities and on coastlines. And if they learned how much devastation was going to be happening, well, why should I pay my mortgage? Why should I be paying off my charge cards? I'll just go to Uncle Bob's farm and get used to raising chickens and goats or whatever, and I turn my back on my bills, declare bankruptcy, whatever. They don't want that. They themselves make these kind of preparations where they're going to be in safety, but they don't care about the common man. And we're talking about the wealthy, the 1%, people who run the banks. The banks do not want people defaulting on the loans they make, and the like. They want to control people via debt. If you're not in debt, they don't have control of you. So this is a big war.
Starr, tell us more about these beings you have had contact with.
Oh my goodness. My first set of beings was when I was a little girl. It was bees. And there was something about the bees. You should be terrified when you're 3 years old, 4 years old, and these bees are surrounding you. But I knew they were trying to tell me something. I knew that they weren't going to hurt me. So that was my first experience. And it wasn't until much later in life where I realized, oh, that was an experience. Then I would have screen images. One was very specific, and it really scared me for the longest time. I was on a pirate ship, and the pirate ship was half in the ocean and half out of the ocean, and with derelict sails. I mean, a real pirate ship. And it was just myself, my aunt, and a stranger, a strange man that neither one of us knew. And we had our feet in the water, and we were kind of waiting because there was no way to get to shore. We were in the middle of the ocean. So that was a screen image. And that being was, I want to, it was scary. It was scary, I have to say. But, I realized much later in life that all of these experiences, I never had a bad experience. They were, I want to say, like sticky, pasty zetas, not your typical zeta, but kind of like pasty. And they had tiny little mouths and no hair at all. And they spoke to us telepathically, one at a time. They would bring us in this room. I thought I was going into a ballroom for a dance. And once I got into this grand room, I recognized that there were two other beings, and they were not close to me. They were far away. And then I don't remember a thing. So there were so many exciting things that I'm learning because I've asked to have those memories in my conscious mind instead of my subconscious. When Whitley Strieber had written Communion, and then I saw the movie. I never read the book. I saw the movie first, and I was like, wow, those chunky little blue guys that were with him. Well, those guys saved my life in Colorado. I was in the Colorado mountains driving home from California to New York in a blizzard, and they saved my life. My car had spun out of control. There was a bright light, and being a New Yorker, I didn't even recognize that there shouldn't be a light on top of the Rocky Mountains, at the time. So these little midgets came out of nowhere, and they had parkas on, like your typical green parkas with the fur around the hood. They came out of nowhere, and they turned my car, up the right way, and I was off, but I was in an avalanche, and I used to tell my friends that, and they would joke and say, Starr, you're smoking weed, you were high. No, these midgets came and saved me from this, avalanche. But it was the same beings that were kind of, sort of, in Whitley Strieber's Communion, and they had come to visit me in my home, wearing farmer's clothing and a hat, and one with a piece of hay sticking out of his mouth. Not only did he visit me that night, my kids weren't. My two older daughters were very young, 3 and 4 years old. But they had visited my youngest at the time, and I, of course, when the being left my bedroom, I was kind of startled because we made eye contact. It was real. It was like I'm seeing a picture of the both of you right now. It was real. This being peered at me in my bedroom. I ran up the stairs to check on my daughter, and she's sitting up in her bed, and she said, "Mommy, a big froggy came to see me." So yeah, it's been really exciting, having all of these memories now, where I'm contributing it to them, trying to get my attention my whole life. And until I found Nancy, thank you, Nancy. I love you, Nancy. Life was strange for me because, who could you talk about these things to? But that's it. I mean, there's been a whole bunch. Again, I didn't feel like I was part of the hybrid program because now that I've met so many people on Facebook and we've discussed these things, their experiences versus mine. The only time that I ever had a baby put in my arms, I was on a ship. I've been on ships before, a couple of different ships too. um, it was like I was in a forest, a jungle. It was beautiful. It smelled good. It was very dimly lit, and there was glass and rooms. But I was in a room. I wasn't going to move, of course. I was not terrified, but I knew I wasn't supposed to go anywhere. And someone came in and handed me this like jelly belly baby, a sticky kind of fishy little baby, but adorable. I mean, the baby just looked at me and a little smile and um, moving all about like a regular little baby. And that was the only time I ever had that baby experience. And I know Nancy has many children that she's gotten to meet, which was exciting to learn. Um, but more and more different entities, some nasty looking ones that I was very frightened of, reptilian, and I have to put it into perspective because I was frightened because of the sight of them, but that didn't mean that they were evil, you know. So you learn as you go.
Nancy, do you have many children?
Well, I was part of the hybrid program when I was in my teens, 10, to 20. And when I was 19, I got to meet one of them who was 3.5 years old at the time. I was babysitting. I was called out into the yard. This was out in the country. And about a 25 to 50 foot diameter ship, went up the stairs, and there was a number of Zetas. Out comes this little guy. You could only see him because you could see the tiny feet, amongst the other feet. He was very shy. So I understood that he was shy, and I sat down and closed my eyes and let him come up and poke me and touch my teeth and all that sort of thing. And then I met him later. It was my son, and I asked him how many offspring he had had. He said at that time 141. So the program is very aggressive, and the reason is that anyone who qualifies to incarnate again on Earth, because it is a transformative period, will become a hybrid, and they're living in the next dimension or density, as it's sometimes called. So as the soul becomes available, because reincarnation exists, it will incarnate into a hybrid. And therefore they need to have these bodies ready, the infants ready to be developed, into a baby for these souls. Not everybody is part of this program. It follows generations. My brother and his daughter, probably my grandmother, etc. We go back. And the reason they need to blend or weave genetics, if they miss something, in order to get something from the genetics, they have to come through more than once and insert fresh genetics from a source. And I heard from a geneticist once that my term, that you have to weave it in from, through a number of generations, he said, that's exactly right. Well, I don't know why that would be, but he said that is so it follows family lines, both male and female. And I am part of that program. But I have met many really weird aliens, just um, uh, lineups of them to get ready for times like this when I would be talking about them.
You talk about the media wars. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, just lately that's come up because I was about 500 days ago last fall, October 20th, step back 500 days, and Obama met with the Premier of China. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, XIZG or whatever. Putin, Russia, China, and the U.S. are shoulder to shoulder as partners to inform mankind that Nibiru is real. It's in the inner solar system. It's going to make a passage, such as, the flood or the Jewish Exodus, etc., and tell the common man this information. And people who are very wealthy, power mongers, the banking enterprise, etc., certainly Netanyahu, do not want this information in the hands of the common man. Knowledge is power, and they want that power up. And So it was agreed that on October 20th, 2014, that they would make this announcement. Um, and Obama has been blocked from this kind of thing. He tries to use the emergency broadcast, it doesn't get through. The Oval Office address, 30-second delay. And how many assassination attempts have been done against him? In Israel, for instance, someone put diesel into his petrol gas tank on his armored car, so it would break down right away, and then he'd have to get out in the middle of the highway and change cars, and of course there we are, sniper ready. He's out in the open, and you could go on and on. So then when October 20th came and went, it was the media in the U.S. that was preventing this from happening. They wouldn't give him the coverage. They were snafooing the emergency broadcast from the White House. So then the Council of Worlds, which there is an administrative force, it's not just aliens and humans and here we are. There's a police, this is like a schoolhouse for humans. We're very young souls here. And the schoolhouse is free will, etc. But the Council of Worlds is the administrative force and makes sure that the bad guys don't just, have at it and do anything they want. There are rules to be followed. So it's kind of like counseling, and psychological counseling can happen, but they can't come down and mass colonize and eat us and, the stuff of Hollywood movies. It's not allowed. So the Council of Worlds was annoyed, because they do want the common man to have this information. It's kind of like final exam time. It's important that we have this information so we can act on it, because actions are where you get your grades, not, philosophical musings, or wish list kind of stuff. You gotta put your life at risk. You gotta put yourself out, for your fellow man or whatever, and that's what gets you your grade. So they want the common man to know about this. So they went to war with the elite, and a lot of things that have happened, exposés, the wealthy are money laundering. Woo! People come out with this and this has been assisted by human contactees and aliens behind the scenes, etc. Well, Fox News and NBC have been some of the holdouts, and a lot of the news enterprises like CNN or Huffington Post or the Daily Mail, etc. Whoever runs those media, they want that to happen. They said, look, the announcement is the lesser of evils, so let's do it. Even the banks are pushing now, just let the announcement happen. But there are certain holdouts, and the problem with trying to proceed without everybody capitulating is that the U.S. public would get a confusing message. Fox would say, "Oh, Obama just went crazy." That's not true. He's joking around, or something like that. And then you got a confusing, argumentative thing going on. Well, Fox is controlled by Murdoch, and NBC is controlled. I think it's part of the enterprise run by somebody called Redstone, extremely powerful. 94-year-old Jewish man, and they're the holdouts. So Brian Williams, all of a sudden we hear about his trumped up stories, war stories, and finally they gave him 6 months leave of absence, cutting his salary in half, and it's probably that he's been fired. Well, and then we had Bob Simon, who was a 60 Minutes guy who met with an accident in New York City. The driver walked away, and Bob Simmons looked like he'd been through the meat grinder. Well, he was beaten up and dead before he was put in the car, according to the Zetas. And the driver is somebody who's disreputable, barely has his driver's license. So it was, a hit job on Bob Simons. And then now we have Bill O'Reilly, and Jon Stewart suddenly decided he had to quit for no reason. And the Zetas said his life had been threatened. And he said, all right, I'm out of here, And now we have Bill O'Reilly, who is trying to hold on to his reputation. And Fox News won't even enter in. They just say, oh, everybody, the liberal media is after him. Well, he's made up stories right and left, and they keep coming out of the woodwork. This is an example. We're seeing, as Zeta said, the flash and parry of swords. What really goes on behind the scenes, this is not the sum and substance at all of the pressure that the banking enterprise, the media, and the rich people are being put under to allow Obama to make his announcement, where he wants to go out and say Ronald Reagan's executive orders as a result of Roswell, etc., and our learning about Nibiru coming inbound. He said no, the alien presence is a national security issue. The pending passage of Nibiru is a national security issue. Don't talk about it. And how many people have been killed, like astronomers, because they wanted to talk about it? So they're told, you can't admit this. And he's already reversed those executive orders, but the public does not know this yet officially.
You talked about something called the Ceres lights. Ceres lights. Can you tell us about that?
This is something brand new. This last week, and apparently it's a big. In the asteroid belt, there's a big chunk of rock with water around it that is what they call a planetoid. It's about diameter-wise, maybe a quarter of the moon. It's small, although it carries a lot of the asteroid mass, a third of the asteroid mass. And in 2004, the Hubble was peeking at it, and they sent a probe out, which is now taking close-up pictures. They were very curious about it because it seemed to have a light on its surface as it rotated and rolled around. So getting up close, and everybody says, what is that light? Well, now we're going to hear that it's just because it is a rock surrounded by water so that it has a round shape. It looks like an ice ball, big ice ball. You know, a very clear, clean surface that would reflect light. Well, come on. There isn't any light to be reflected there. It's an alien spaceport, and we had the Rosetta Comet also a couple of months back that was in the news that had been sending out radio signals, and they sent a probe up to find out what was going on. Someone in the European Space Agency, ESA, put out in the public the actual photo that their probe took, which showed a little spaceport, like a little city, and that was where the radio signals were coming from. But what was released officially to the public was something airbrushed and fuzzy, so you didn't see that. You know, so the Zetas have said we're not going to get the straight poop about the Ceres lights either, but that is an alien spaceport. These spaceports are not service to other, service to self. Most growing worlds become 95% service to other, where people practice the golden rule. They care about others as much as they care about themselves. They care about the general welfare, and but 5% never really grow up, and they stay immature. They grab everything they can get. They're looking for power and control. They're greedy. And we certainly know of people that fall into both those categories. Everyone knows this is a mixed world, the Earth, where people are to make their decisions, you know, by free will, taking action, etc. But after we graduate from our kindergarten here, we go on to where the service to other become more intelligent, and they space travel and blah, blah, blah. But the service to self, that are the 5% that usually they remain immature, they have to live on like prison planets with each other. And it's not pleasant. They're very rule-oriented. You know, there's a dictator in charge. They can do some space travel and learn things, etc., but they're very, very restricted. So these people do not do density switching well. There's many densities. We're on third, and then there's fourth, fifth, sixth, and on, you know, which is a more rapid movement of the physical atoms, for one thing. And they don't, the fly is an example of dealing with density switching where you don't do it well. Now, contactees are teleported all the time. You leave a room and you end up somewhere else. Well, you didn't physically make that distance. You were dissolved in one place and moved in a different dimension. And the service to other, like the Zetas that I work with, are very adept at that. And they don't, they tell you, like, don't touch each other, now just stand, keep your hands to yourself, now you're someplace else. But the service to self are clumsy, like the fly, and they would mess up all the time. And then, so their bosses tell them, when you go to the third density environment and you're counseling those humans that they should become self-centered like you are because you're looking for recruits, stay there in third density and don't leave. And so therefore they have to have places like on that ice planet or on the Rosetta Comet. And they have to have those kind of space, or the dark side of the moon is another one. That's where they live.
Starr, you've talked about these red lakes and rivers. What's that all about?
Well, we're getting a lot of debris from Planet X, and it's iron oxide. It's coming straight from the tail of PX, and it's swathing all over the planet. And of course, the news people are coming forward saying that it's dust from the Sahara. That's all over Florida or Texas, and of course, that's not it, not at all. And we're having it more and more, and it's a biblical thing. And in the Bible, it said the rivers turned red. And yes, they do, and they will. And it will get worse and worse and worse up until the time of the shift. Again, now we can add fireballs to that. We're seeing fireballs all over the place. And it's so great that we have the internet now, because people share these photos right away. Yesterday I had a man from India who was concerned and I turned him on, Nancy, to ZetaTalk immediately. He had been following my posts, and he was frightened and wanted to know what was going on because he had seen fireballs in India himself. He saw it. He sent me the pictures. So I posted it to the Ning. And I said, this is going to be a normal occurrence, not to worry. No, Nibiru, Planet X is not going to hit us, but it's going to cause a lot of commotion, on its passage out. But that's where all this red dust comes from. Although the news people will tell you different, or NASA.
Nancy, are we having methane poisoning on the Earth?
Not methane poisoning, but we're having a lot of release of methane. Now, methane comes from trapped, one of the anaerobic, where there's no exposure to oxygen, and it's underground, and it's slow decomposition. Under the permafrost, for instance, a lot of methane pools have developed because it wasn't always that was the polar circle. When you have a pole shift, is really a crustal shift. That Nibiru is a big magnet, and when it flies overhead, it grabs our north and south pole and tips us. This time we're going to have a 90-degree tip, but ice ages, wandering poles, that's a crustal shift. And so therefore, around the Arctic Circle, you have a lot of permafrost that has methane underneath it. And as the ground is under tension, from all this jerking back and forth, we have an earth wobble that's going on where our magnetic North Pole is given a shove on a daily basis, and then it turns around and bounces back and tries to right itself. And all of this is rough on the earth plates, which crack and split open and release methane. So an example of this is in Siberia. They have what has been hitting the news, mysterious holes in the ground. And they don't know what causes this. And they're thinking it's a gas explosion of methane because of global warming, which is absurd. Although this can melt the permafrost and make it slushy, But the Zeta said what it is meteor showers from what Starr was talking about, the debris-ridden tail that has increased bolides and fireballs and red dust and yada yada. These meteors will hit in Siberia and drive through the permafrost and hit underground streams, and steam is immediately produced, which causes an explosion, and there's your lovely big hole. And they are counting these by the dozens up there and saying, my. Well, east of the Ural Mountains, they have had flashes of light. There was one a couple of months ago, and motorists driving there, east of the Ural Mountains said, oh, what's a big light in the sky and lit up like day, and nobody had well, that was a methane explosion, very bright. Or you can get a light tower. We had one in Escanaba on Lake Michigan. It's a Michigan Peninsula, which is above Wisconsin there. Earthquake lights. People went out with their cameras and caught this. There's the blue, there's the red, there's the gold, and earthquake lights are multicolored like rainbow. They don't look like a rainbow, but what I'm saying is it's all colors. And then there was a transformer explosion, and coming out of that transformer, going straight up into the sky, was this beam of light, as though someone had focused a floodlight up into the sky, and that was methane release, a fire. So they had three different expressions of the tension in the ground. The earthquake lights, the explosion of the transformer, because electromagnetic pulse happens when rock is under stress. The Zetas have called this an electromagnetic screech. When rock is compressed, electricity flows through it more readily because all the water, the little air pockets are compressed out, and water touches rock, and then it's a better conductor, and up it goes. This is what makes pets run away, and the like, and you have a lot of electromagnetic problems when there's rock under stress. So, for example, the Sunda Plate, where we have all those planes going down, the total engine failure, the engines knock out. That rock is under a lot of stress, and it's over water, and what we're talking about here is that those planes just lose their electronics. It's a wipeout. So Escanaba had the methane lights, but in the past that's been captured in Iraq by soldiers over there who wore night vision goggles, and they said they would catch and take photos of this up in the air like a floodlight going up. And over Canada it was captured as like a curling smoke, not like a tornado, but that type of thing where there's just the smoke is winding up. And what is that? Well, it's the remnant of the methane light tower. So yeah, we're having a lot of methane explosions because it's being released from the ground.
Nancy, you described something called the Zeta Vision, where you were looking down the Earth from space and you were positioned over North America. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this was a very interesting experience, which I wrote up on, I can't remember exactly where it is on the web, but it was a group of a few hundred people in the audience, and I was to go out and introduce a very weird-looking little woman, and she had, her legs looked like the rear legs of a dog or a horse or something, where then she had tentacles around her waist, as though she could walk in water and collect nutrients if the water was waist high. Her hands had digits, but they looked chubby like a cat's paw, and her head was very tiny, but she had two huge yellow eyes that were multifaceted like a bug's eyes. So she was very bizarre looking and covered with kind of a soft fur. And I was to take her out and introduce her, which I did. I took her by the hand. She was going to project, and I suspect this was a telepathic connection with every human that was there, and me included, holographic vision. I don't think she played that out in the air the way we think of holographs. I think she essentially took over every mind, every brain that was in that room, and she had the power to do it. She was good. and and showed the plate movements, which I call the 7 of 10, or the Zetas have called the 7 of 10. They were asked in 2008, if the pole shift is a 10 of 10, where are we now? We were 2 or 3, and then we moved along. The 7 of 10 is where you get plates moving, like the Sunda plate going down. The New Madrid will split open as part of the 7 of 10. South America is rolling its top part to the west and squeezing the Caribbean plate down. Africa is rolling its top part to the east, and it will increase the distance in the Gibraltar and into Sinai and the Red Sea, and etc. So the 8 of 10 is a lot of sociological changes. We have something of an overlap going on now, and the 9 of 10 is the last weeks, which is a 2-month period. So she was describing to us, or playing in our minds, the 7 of 10 scenarios. And the New Madrid will happen because the North American continent is being stressed on a diagonal. It has a flat top. If you look at the Earth plates, going from Japan, up through the Bering Strait, through the Arctic over to Iceland and Greenland, that's pretty much a straight line. Then we curve down the Atlantic and come around Mexico and curve up along the San Andreas. Well, those are round. But the North American plate cannot roll as South America and Africa can because they're not roundish. It's got a flat top, and the flat top will not move. So the flat top stays, and the Mexico pulls west, and the stress is going to cause booming and crevasses and things like that are going on already in North America. And then the rip of the New Madrid, which essentially takes the part to the east of the Mississippi and moves it to the northeast, the part to the west of the Mississippi, and pulls it down to the southwest. That's the New Madrid adjustment, which we are going to have in our future.
Will the pole shift occur in the next 5 years?
I would say yes. I don't think it's going to be this year.
Very interesting. I've heard you say that the televangelist Pat Robertson said that all the contactees should be stoned to death. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. In the 700 Club, this was years ago. I think it must have been 10 years ago because I was talking about it for a long time. We're all talking to demons, Anyone who says they're talking to aliens should be stoned to death. Well, guess what? That's half of humanity. In 2008, the contactees numbered about 12,000, according to the Zetas. And because of the Earth changes and all the weird stuff going on where people sense that they're being lied to, they subconsciously, they just know, they're not being told the truth. They're seeing signs in the sky. The sun and the moon aren't where they're supposed to be. The weather is just bizarre. And they sense, so curiosity, or this kind of request for counseling, is a call to talk to the aliens. They consider that what's called the call. And before you know it, you're talking to some alien, and this is all recorded in your subconscious. It can be a little discombobulating at first, but most people, that they sense the love. They sense that this is well-intended. They're not frightened. They're not being hurt. Their questions are being addressed, etc. And so at this current time, I think it's been this last year or so, the Zeta said 3.5 billion. Well, I'm sure we're beyond that now. So practically everybody is a contactee.
But they may not know it.
Right, they may not know it. It's recorded in your subconscious. Didn't used to be. Way in the past, if you go back, people were drawing pictures of aliens, the Vedas, which were books written about battles between good and evil aliens in the sky and what they looked like. And this was all recorded in the subconscious. Go back to the biblical talk about, who was it? Moses was talking to a burning bush, this kind of thing. Or people say the angels were floating up in the sky. And according to the Zetas, those were humans being floated because aliens have good control of gravity, and they can just pick you up and float you, up into their spaceship, and they do. I keep my eyes closed because I have a fear of heights, but and those were the angels. They were just people that were contactees being taken up to chat with some aliens in a spaceship, etc. And the sun would glint off their hair because they never washed their hair in those days, so the hair was greasy, and that was the halo that we would see. So it's only since the days of Roswell or so, a little ahead of that, that the rule was laid down that contact should be in the subconscious, and that was because it was anticipated there would be a very rapid awakening, and to protect contactees from people like Pat Robinson, who is just making money hand over fist in his gold mines in Africa, and hardly, a practice the golden rule kind of person at all, but he's out there trying to lead people and say this is what good Christians should do to protect people and contactees from people like that who would be slaughtered, murdered, burned at the stake like witches or who knows what. It's all in your subconscious, but you can bring it forward. You can have it recalled in dreams. You can just lay down and relax and meditate, and there's the story.
Do you think Emmanuel Velikovsky was sent here to Earth, to mankind, to get us to start to think about these cataclysms?
There's been a lot of star children, and there are today. Obama's a star child, and people like Gandhi, Jesus, Mohammed, Buddha, for instance, Einstein, no question. In other words, we're talking about very advanced souls who come down and incarnate, to try to give us a jump start in certain information or certain concepts, and the like. Sure, he was a peer of Einstein. Einstein died. He had Velikovsky's book open on his desk at the time. And they used to play chess, I guess, etc. So I have no doubt that Velikovsky was probably a star child, yes.
And what are your thoughts on Zecharia Sitchin?
Well, if he was a star child, he was timid. He did terrific research, and he was so accurate about his translations. But what about this business of when is Nibiru going to come back? Oh, not for 4,000 years or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And the Zetas were asked about that. I mean, clearly, the Jewish Exodus was the last passage. I mean, we could go on forever about all the signs, the red dust and the exploding volcano in the middle of the Mediterranean, and the fact that Greenland, moved further south, and the axis of the globe shifted yay many degrees, etc. It was, and he was not stupid. Sitchin was quite bright. So the Zeta said, this is what's known as not in my lifetime. Sitchin did not want to contemplate having the passage and the pole shift happen while he was alive. And so he said, nah. It's a form of denial, but he really seemed to believe that, and he was firm about that. It's amazing how denial can grip you, and people are using it extensively. And as the reality of the earth changes and what's happening becomes more and more obvious and presses on people, they will not say, oh, I guess I was wrong before, I admit I was wrong. Their denial will become more hardened. They will become red-faced and walk off sputtering, slam doors, refuse to hear what you have to say. So I don't think a star child who would come down to educate us would be that fearful to say, not in my lifetime. They would have more courage.
Nancy, we're running out of time. I just want to make sure you have an opportunity to remind people again of your website and anything else you wanted to close with here.
Yeah, just let me again say ZetaTalk is all one word, ZetaTalk.com. And the discussions, etc., or reporting on current Earth changes, which is just excellent work done in the pole shift, ning, poleshift.ning.com. Go to those sites and get educated.
Starr, do you have any websites you want to plug?
Poleshift.ning. That's the main one. International community. We share news as it happens 24 hours a day.
Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, Starr. I appreciate you coming on.
Bye, Mark.
Good evening.